Once the seedling's root is sufficiently developed, a hemp plant will be able to uptake the water and nutrients it needs to develop quickly, resulting in an explosion of vegetative growth, easily doubling in size week after week. And this phase of growth is known as the vegetative stage. A regular hemp plant will stay in the vegetative stage for as long as the light cycle is over 12 to 14 hours every day. So to be safe, you want to ensure that your plants are getting at least 14 hours of light a day if you want the plant to keep growing larger in size. And getting larger in size is what the vegetative stage is all about, as the plant will only focus on developing more stems and leaves during this time. Hemp plants also like an environment of around 70 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit and a relative humidity range of 50 to 60% during this stage of growth. And if you're using VPD to monitor your environment, you'll want it to be around 0.8 to 1.1 kilopascal. This makes the vegetative stage pretty straightforward, as you'll only need to keep the plant growing until you're satisfied with the plant size. And there's a number of things that can be done during this stage of growth to maximize the potential of the plant in any given space. The vegetative stage is when you want your plant to move into its final container. For some, this means transplanting the plant into a larger container size. And for others that started the plant in its final container, you can skip this step. To transplant a plant from a seed cell or small planter, you'll need to remove all the plant roots and grow medium out of its original container, and then bury it into the new container. To transplant a plant from a nursery bag, you can just bury the bag directly into the new container without having to remove it, since the roots have no problems growing through this bag. As for what planter size to go with, this is tied to the size of the plant you plan on harvesting, since the size of a plant is loosely tied to the size of its root structure. A 3-gallon fabric pot can easily support a small to medium-sized plant. A 5-gallon fabric pot can easily support a medium to large-sized plant, and a 7-gallon fabric pot can be used to grow a large plant. Note that this doesn't apply for plants growing with a soil that has nutrients built into it. And with these, the larger the container, the better, since the nutrients in the soil will be depleted by the plant over time. So the more that's available, the longer it can feed the plant for. The plant at this stage will need to be fed a grow fertilizer, which is one that is rich in nitrogen, the main nutrient needed for leaf development. Most organic potting mixes will have ample amount of this built in to start. And if you're feeding with a liquid fertilizer, it's recommended to start at 50% of the stated dosage in the first week of the vegetative stage, and then each subsequent week, increase the dosage by 25% until you're at 100. Anytime during the vegetative stage, if you notice your lower fan leaves starting to yellow at a fast pace, you should increase the fertilizer dosage. If you notice your fan leaves turning dark green with the tips of the leaves dying off or clawing downwards, you should decrease the fertilizer dosage. Plant training is any technique that manipulates the plant's growth pattern to fit a given space. And this is important because if left alone, hemp plants grow similar in shape to a Christmas tree, in that it focuses all of its energy on the tallest part of the plant. So a typical hemp plant will have one main top stem and a number of smaller side stems. Outdoors, this is perfectly fine, since the sun can still provide even lighting no matter where the side stems are, resulting in an even growing plant once the flowering stage begins. However, indoors, this is not the case, as the grow light intensity will decrease exponentially the further away you go from the source, resulting in a large bud on the top stem and much smaller buds further down the plant. For most indoor grow spaces, this shape is also a waste of space, as most grow spaces have plenty of extra horizontal space to spare. And if the plant doesn't utilize this empty space, then all that light shining here will be wasted. So training a plant's growth horizontally instead of vertically can ensure that the top canopy is even throughout the entire grow space, which will result in not just an increase in yields at harvest, but also more consistency in the harvested bud sizes. The two most popular ways to train a hemp plant is with topping and low stress training. Topping just means cutting off a part of the top stem to prevent the growth from continuing through the main stem. This will instead direct the growth to the next node down. And since each node sprouts 2 stems on either side, it'll naturally produce 2 new top stems instead of 1. Topping also has the added benefit of lowering the height of the plant, as the side stems are perpendicular to the main stem. While the plant can take a few days to switch gears in developing the stems on the highest node, the lower stems will continue to develop, allowing these lower stems to catch up to the top stems. And a lot of times, this means that by just topping once, you'll get an even canopy of 4 main stems. Topping can even be done multiple times to increase the total amount of top stems. Although each time a plant is topped, it takes a few days for the plant to recover. So constantly topping a plant will extend its growing timeline. Next, we have low stress training, which is the technique of physically bending a stem in the direction you want it to grow without breaking the stem. This is most often done with plant twist ties and work great when used in conjunction with the fabric pot due to the built-in grommets that can hold the ties in place. One of the easiest ways to low stress train an entire hemp plant is to just bring down the main stem to the same height as the side stems, which in turn takes advantage of the fact that a hemp plant focuses its growth on the stems located on the top of the plant. So this tricks it into focusing its energy equally among all the side stems that are now suddenly located at the top. You can also low stress train individual stems, bringing down any stem that starts to grow higher than the ones around it. Low stress training does have its limitations though, as only the newest growth on a hemp stem are flexible enough to be bent. So if you're considering utilizing low stress training, you have to start early in the plant's vegetative stage, and then continue applying it with any new growth if needed as the plant develops. A trellis net is another form of low stress training that automates the process by dictating a set top canopy. So anytime new growth appears above the trellis net, you can push it below the netting, positioning it to fill out any space that isn't used yet. Once the trellis netting is completely filled with plant stems, the plant can then be flowered, which ensures that all the horizontal space is used up. As the plant gets larger, it'll start to produce significantly more leaves than needed, since out in the wild, a number of them will get damaged from nature, and due to the unpredictability of where the plant might be located, you'll want to ensure that it's able to capture plenty of sunlight from any side. In a controlled environment, however, we know exactly where the plant is getting its light from, and because the top canopy is typically blocking all the grow light
from reaching the lower leaves. Unless you're supplementing your grow with an inner canopy lighting, these leaves are going to be using up the plant's resources without providing much in return. An overabundance of fan leaves will also cause them to start overlapping, trapping moisture between them, and this will block airflow from reaching the inner part of the plant. Both of these problems will promote the growth of mold and mildew, as well as creating an inviting home for pests. So a light defoliation is always recommended anytime the vegetative growth starts to become unwieldy. When choosing which leaves to remove, always go with the bigger ones first, as it's easier to remove one big fan leaf than 3 smaller leaves touching it. You also want to start from the bottom up, since the top leaves at the plant canopy are the ones taking in the most light. And a good rule of thumb is to remove enough vegetative growth so you can see through the bottom half of your plant.
A plant will on average double in height in the flowering stage, so it's important to flower the plant once it's at half the size of your available grow space to ensure that it doesn't outgrow this space. It's also important to solve any plant issues in the vegetative stage before it starts to flower, as a delay in growth during the vegetative stage will just result in the plant taking a couple more days to recover, while a delay in growth during the flowering stage will impact the final yields.